Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.
Welcome to an election edition of Liberty with Love with Robin Koerner. It's not usual that I do 2 consecutive shows monologuing, but, thanks to the presidential race, I'm going to make an exception. This weekend, I say this weekend because this show is going out, as always, streaming Saturday and Sunday, and this time it's going out on Saturday and Sunday before Americans go to the polls to elect their next king, I mean president. And, I haven't had much to say about this race, really. I mean, considering that I'm a political commentator and I've been going around the country for for as long as the presidential race has been going. I've been going around talking about liberty and politics and political communication and all that kind of stuff, right? You might think that I talk a lot about the presidential race and I offer my opinion. And, sometimes I'm asked, and when I do give my opinion, but I've been finding this whole Clinton-Trump thing somewhat boring. It's an interesting example of some of the principles that I teach with respect to how culture drives politics and, all politics are the politics of identity, and seeing that play out in the insurgencies of Trump and Sanders as it was, and all of this good stuff. And I've mentioned some of that on this show, and certainly mentioned it a lot in the classes I've been giving the last year. But, I guess since I was the blue Republican guy, and last time, obviously that was all about supporting Ron Paul, and last time I wrote thousands and thousands of words about the presidential election and about my favorite presidential candidate. It makes sense that I should probably opine just once, on what we should be doing as voters on November the 8th. It's important. I mean, at some level, it's important. At some level, you look at where we are in America and the choice that faces us. If you see the choice as only Clinton-Trump, which I don't, and I'll get onto that. But if you see it, the choice that way, as so many Americans do, it's a pretty sad state of affairs. But anyway, it is what it is. So how do I feel about it? Well, first of all, I would like to put a principle out there. And that principle is this. And it is a principle, by the way, that I argued for in an article in a very different context. It was an article that I wrote, a year or two ago, called A Primer on Compromise for Libertarians. A Primer on Compromise for Libertarians. And in a way, it's maybe more relevant now than it was when I wrote it. Because in that article I make this point. The lesser of two evils is not the same as the lesser of two goods. And so often in politics, people vote, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, for what they feel to be the lesser of two evils. And in this article, I make the following point, that the lesser of two evils and the lesser of two goods are fundamentally different. The justification for the lesser of two goods does not work for the lesser of two evils. And on the other hand, sometimes people call the lesser of two evils actually somebody who is the lesser of two goods. Now, this election with Clinton and Trump as front runners, and I have to laugh when I say Clinton and Trump as front runners, because if I don't laugh, I'll just cry, is one in which, from where I sit, broadly speaking, we have two evils to choose from. Now, I know that most people who listen to, well, political commentators like me and unlike me will probably feel uncomfortable with that because they have their favorite candidate, and at the very least they will see their favorite candidate as not evil. But of course, what I mean by evil as opposed to good is a candidate that moves us away from the principles that we believe in, that we want to see manifest in our society, in our culture, in our politics, in our country. For me, of course, these are principles of liberty. They are more or less the founding principles of our nation. And they are not just because I have a doctrinal commitment to liberty as some kind of philosophical axiom, but because I believe it delivers the best experience for human beings. It allows the greatest welfare, not with a capital W in the sense of, welfare state, but well-being, prosperity, happiness, joy, self-expression to me and all of my fellow American compatriots. So that's what the direction of the good is for me. And so when I look at a candidate, relative to today, I ask, would they move my country or my state or my city in the direction of the good or away from the good, i.e. in the direction of evil? Now, what an interesting state of affairs with Clinton and Trump. All of the excitement on the left was for Bernie Sanders, not for Hillary, just as all of the excitement among liberty folks and many conservatives was for Ron Paul back in 2011, right? There's that same kind of insurgency starting in the culture, lots of young people filling stadiums. We saw all of that with Ron Paul. We saw it with Bernie Sanders. And then we've got Clinton, and she's not really, broadly speaking, I'm going to be generalizing throughout this show, not really exciting anyone. She's not exciting anyone. Now, on the other hand, you have Trump, who's much more like Bernie Sanders in a way, in that he has generated massive excitement among a certain chunk of the population. But unlike Sanders, other folks, maybe the majority, certainly a large minority of Americans, look at him and just are terrified at what they see, not just because they disagree with him philosophically. There's lots of Americans who disagreed with Bernie Sanders philosophically, but because of the kind of person they perceive him to be. So, I actually find the whole thing so banal. I have found the thing so banal that I find it even difficult to watch these presidential debates. And when I say find it banal, what I'm really referring to is just the lack of sophistication of the statements that these candidates make, purporting to have, some kind of power that they don't have as a president, to be able to make huge changes in this complex entity, called a country, because they have the presidency, and so we get sweeping statements from both sides that really are signaling, sometimes they're virtue signaling, sometimes they're just kind of signaling political identity to a base, right? But anyway, I just haven't found the political discourse intellectually elevating or engaging or really seriously looking to what we as a country should be looking to, right? And what is that? Well, in my case, massive takedown of liberty, massively interventionist foreign policy, massive crony corporatism, and just general cronyism in the sense of big state, big corporate, especially big financial corporate axes that really do drive the experiences of many Americans and result in kind of external interference in the lives of many of us. They're the kind of things that I'm interested in hearing thought out ideas about, right? And I don't think we had any of that. So, it's kind of painful for me to watch the debates. But because of what I do, I made myself watch, some of them or bits of them, etc., etc. And, well, what are you left with? Clinton, to me, is philosophically well, evil. I don't mean to say she's morally evil. I mean, I wouldn't say that, that's very loaded. But philosophically, she's in the direction away from the good. She's towards the big government. She's towards intervention in the lives of, average Americans, with this self-righteous belief, as have so many on the left, and so many who benefit from exercising power, that they can interfere according to their good intentions without causing unintended consequences that will do more harm than good. I look at Clinton. I don't see someone who's sincere. People called was it Romney? Yeah, people called Romney a flip-flopper last time. But, just go on YouTube and you can hear Clinton's flip-flops. There's something to me that is very much not authentic about her. I have great difficulty with that. But what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is Donald Trump. Now, I see that we're going into the break, so I will tell you what I think of him after the break. So I said I would tell you what I thought of Donald Trump after the break, and I will, but I should just spend a little more time on Hillary Clinton. Obviously, the narrative against Clinton is very much bound up in this idea that she is establishment. And I think that's right? I mean, in as much as we have been screwed by this state corporate axis, we have to be concerned about Clinton. These huge fees from these huge speeches. Who are her friends? Who does she hang out with? What are the special interests that she has a record of supporting? Also, when it comes to our foreign policy, what kind of approach does she advocate? She does seem like, to me, like a neocon in many ways. And indeed, there are plenty of Republican neocons who are supporting Clinton in this race. And I do believe that tells you a lot. I also am most concerned that, even in her position as Secretary of State, this senior position of government, she has had an opportunity to put in good perspective, in a proper perspective, the massive takedown of our liberties, much of which has been going on while she's been in political office and has indeed supported in her political office. And then there's the fact that, I just don't feel she has an intellectual engagement with the impact of big government on. I don't think she's concerned to really understand whether the kind of big government policies that she tends to advocate, big government solutions, whether at home or abroad, they always seem to be asserted without justification of their positive results or their predicted positive results. And this obviously concerns me. That's Clinton. Clinton, to me, is more of this big government that we have seen under Obama. And then there's the economic side, right? There's a lot of stuff like taxation and all this kind of area. I know she has said there will be no increase in taxes on anybody earning under whatever it is, $250,000. But there's no serious engagement with some of the most egregious elements of, for example, our tax code, many of which are there because they suit an intrusive government. And also they suit those who pay her hundreds of thousands of dollars for speeches and who she attends parties with. So there's the whole kind of stinks of the establishment thing. And we know that government has taken to itself the ability to give great gifts to corporations, to special interests, to those who can afford lobbyists. And of course, when government gives itself the ability to give out so much, then it pays people to corrupt the system, right? To pay to corrupt the system in their favor. And that's where we are. And that is certainly what Clinton represents. And indeed, you know what? And even if you disagree with all of that, it is very clear from where the excitement was on the left, where the authenticity was on the left, right? Even though I may disagree with socialism or democratic socialism, which is Bernie's favorite political philosophy, right? There was this sense of authenticity, of consistency, of knowing that you saw the man. You saw on the outside what was on the inside, and this is very important in politics, and it's actually very important when it comes to being able to rely on the integrity of those who would exercise power. So now let us talk about the Donald Trump alternative. I was speaking just 2 days ago at a Republican event in Bellevue, the sister city of my home city of Seattle. There was a significant number of folks there, and it was a an official party event. And fascinatingly, what I heard when it came to Donald Trump were really apologetics. There's a lot of apologetics with Donald Trump. There's these admissions that, you may have a problem with him. This is Republicans talking to Republicans, but what's the alternative? But remember just how awful Clinton is, but et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of hand waving. And frankly, if I was a Republican, he was my candidate, the best I would be doing would be hand waving too. Now, many libertarians, many people whose principles I respect, people who understand the danger of big, intrusive government, of course being the monopoly of force, which is always dangerous when exercised within individual lives and experience. A lot of those folks have compiled a list of things that Donald Trump has said he supports, that are certainly in a smaller government direction, that certainly seem to be principled in some ways. Not that I'm going to assert here that Donald Trump is any more principled than Hillary Clinton. I'm not going to assert that. But some of them make sense. So, for example, a huge one for millions of Americans all over the world is citizen-based taxation. America is one of only 2 countries in the world that tax their citizens on income all over the world, right? Even if it's being taxed in another country. So I'm British. So if I earn money in Britain, America wants to tax it even though it's taxed in Britain, just because I'm an American citizen. It is completely egregious. And even if you don't object to that on principle, what is utterly evil, and I use the word evil advisedly this time, is that the compliance costs and the punishments meted out to people when they can't comply with this extremely complicated 74,000-page tax code, even though they're not earning American money or living in America, right? These compliance costs are huge, and the penalties are massive. They are massively disrupting of lives, and there are impositions by the American government on foreign banks to divulge private financial information about Americans all over the world. This is actually in violation of EU Human Rights Charter, the United Nations Charter, believe it or not. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, all of these things. But this is how crazy the US government has got, demanding to see the most personal details of the lives of Americans. When there's no question of any crime, when there's no question even that they haven't been paying the taxes that are due, just intrusion. Now, Donald Trump knows about this and he wants to be done with it. He wants to end citizenship taxation. Now, this for me is huge. More broadly, a lot of his policies seem to be toward reducing the size of the state, not increasing it. He at least has some rhetoric now about, why the Iraq war was such a bad idea. Well, at least he's got the guts to say that. I obviously was saying it at the time, as were many of those, obviously, who listen to this show. He does seem to be more skeptical of foreign interventionism, especially of the military kind. We like that. And there certainly is some value in having a president who is not beholden to special interests in the way that Clinton is, and, most presidents, most of our politicians, most of those people who work in Washington, D.C. are. That's a big deal in this age of corruption and in this age of foreign interventionism. So I see why some libertarians are supporting him, but then. He also seems to have no regard for the First Amendment, even while he is talking up the Second, right? He's talking up the Second. He knows what his base is, but with respect to the First, he's quite happy to say, let's just shut down the New York Times because of the rubbish they print. What about the freedom of the press and free speech? But that's not the biggest problem with Donald Trump, is it? The biggest problem with Donald Trump is, well, just watch that man on the stage. Just watch how he talks to people. He is authoritarian by nature. He talks down to people. He feels comfortable with that. And he's not coherent. All that stuff about Clinton and the abortions at 8 months, and he just makes stuff up. Stairway Press is pleased to announce the publication of Robin Koerner's first book, If You Can Keep It, Why We Nearly Lost It and How We Get It Back. Jeffrey Tucker in the book's foreword wrote, "We seek to end government as we know it, but that is not the whole of what we seek. We also favor something beautiful. Explaining what this looks like and the rhetorical apparatus that necessarily accompanies this is the greatest value of Koerner's book." Barry Farber, award-winning talk show host, wrote, "Robin Koerner's political, psychological and philosophical rampage through today's America, turning on lights we didn't even know were off, takes more and more of your intellectual breath away according to how high you rated intellectually in the first place." Chris Ann Hall, constitutional attorney and educator, says, "Robin Koerner is a defender of liberty and a true lover of America's constitutional republic. The knowledge that Robin brings to his readers is sure to be instrumental in the restoration of our American foundational principles." If You Can Keep It by Robin Koerner, published by Stairway Press. Go to ifyoucankeepit.us for your pre-ordered, personally signed copy.
Trust. For nearly 4 decades, that is the reputation Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has forged with their customers. Now, with their full e-commerce website, rrbi.co, it's easier than ever to buy or sell precious metals via Bitcoin or major credit card. Visit them online at rrbi.co or call 800-874-9760 to speak with an experienced professional today. Roberts & Roberts, when you're serious about precious metals.
In 2011, Robin Koerner wrote the article that launched the biggest coalition for Ron Paul's presidential run, called Blue Republican. Now, Stairway Press is pleased to announce the publication of his first book, If You Can Keep It, Why We Nearly Lost It and How We Get It Back. Jeffrey Tucker, who wrote the foreword, says, "Brilliant ideas come in effervescent packages. This is a good description of Robin Koerner's provocative work. It's a work of stunning erudition and sincerity. I also happen to agree with it. I've been struggling toward a similar thesis for a good part of my writing career, though I'm certain Robin has gone beyond even my most mature thought. His section on liberty as a realization of a civilization of love truly sweeps me away with its insight and depth. I know that time is short and that people don't read as carefully as they should, but this section deserves close study by every advocate of liberty. It will change the way you think and speak about the topic. We need this book now. Pre-order your personally signed copy of If You Can Keep It at ifyoucankeepit.us. Oh yes, and then of course there was the that whole video with Donald Trump making that demeaning, one might say, those demeaning remarks about women on the bus. Well, look, I listened to the video and I don't think it proves that he goes around sexually assaulting women, but clearly this just is his attitude. What it speaks to is a guy with, I'm not sure if it's a superiority or I think it is a superiority complex. He's a narcissist, right? He's a megalomaniac. He's an egotist, probably the best word. And I think he said those remarks, bigging up his sexual, prowess as a man, because he thought he was impressing the men who were with him. Makes him sound good, makes him sound big in his head, right? And for the rest of us, he's just crass. He's just crass. He says so much that, it just makes your eyes roll. And I hate to say this, but in that third debate, the Trump versus Clinton came off as the sane, smart one. And I don't think he's engaged intelligently with anything. So I guess what I'm saying with Trump is, he may be reading out some policies that I like in some areas, but I don't think he's got the intelligence, certainly not the emotional intelligence, to deliver. And more to the point, when it comes to most of those things, he should know, well, he should have read his constitution, which I don't think he's read, but he should also know what a president can and cannot do. He was in that poor mining village in Virginia, right? The county West Virginia, the county that has voted most for Trump, I think it was like 91% in the primaries for Trump, is a poor mining county in West Virginia. And Trump went there and promised to reopen the mines. Like, he can do that? What kind of power would a president need to aggregate to himself to be able to open mines that are closed for economic reasons? I mean, this is absurd talk, right? And this is the problem with Trump. It's absurd talk. So he's an authoritarian by nature. He's crass, and he says things that are just clearly nonsense. There's my problem with Trump. So I've got a philosophical problem with Clinton, and I don't trust her. And I've got a problem of intelligence and personality, I suppose. Instinct with Trump. Is either one, and now we're getting to, but now we're getting to scratch where it itches. Is either one the lesser of two evils or the lesser of two goods? Well, certainly, depending on what you most care about, one of them is the lesser of the two evils, right? But as per my article, the one that I mentioned at the top of this show, the primer on compromise for libertarians, Google it, check it out. If you vote for the lesser of two evils, you move the country in the direction of evil, you make it worse. The argument you're making, if you are making one, for voting of the lesser of two evils does not stand if you're still voting to move the country in the wrong direction relative to where we are now. You don't get any moral points for moving us less fast off the cliff if you're moving us off the cliff. Unless you are clear that your vote is to move us in the right direction, i.e. away from the cliff, right? Then the act of voting for the lesser of two evils, the clue is in the name, is still a lesser act of evil, but an evil nonetheless. Better not to vote, I would say. Well, of course, that's not our situation, right? Because there are alternatives to voting to Trump, for Trump and Clinton. Now, here's the other thing. Surely it is clear that by voting for Trump or Clinton, even though you won't really be, because in nearly every case, people who are voting for Trump or Clinton are voting against the other one. They're either mindlessly voting their party tribal allegiance, and or they are simply more scared of the other one, right? So nobody's voting for Clinton or for Trump. They're voting against Trump or against Clinton, right? Now, however, if you are voting against the one you're not voting for by voting for the other, you are nevertheless actively voting for the establishment of the two-party duopoly that is turning out that kind of political dross, right? So you are actively contributing to sustaining the system that gives us no better options than Clinton and Trump, that disenfranchises, actually disenfranchises those who would want to hear from, let's say, a Bernie Sanders or a Jill Stein or a Gary Johnson, let alone vote for them. You are supporting a system, a duopoly, that not only basically controls the messaging through, if you like, its soft power in the media, but actually corruptly passes laws to lock down that duopoly, to keep people out, to keep other parties out, to keep other ideas out, right? The fact that a candidate like Gary Johnson, who is going to be on the ballot in all 50 states, who therefore theoretically can win that race, the race for the White House, the fact that he doesn't get a look in on a national debate stage, it is a travesty. And I understand where it comes from, but everything about this is stuck, right? We have a corrupt duopoly and we're stuck in it because the Republicans and the Democrats together can always make the rules that make sure it's only ever the Republicans that the Democrats have to worry about, or the Democrats that the Republicans have to worry about. They've got everybody locked out. Very high barriers to entry. This is corrupt. If you vote for one or the other, if you don't honestly believe you're moving us at least away from evil and toward good, then you are voting for corruption. You are actively part of the problem. Actively part of the problem. You are contributing to this. So do not complain that we only have a Trump and we only have a Clinton. And do not complain when we only get candidates of that caliber next time round. Now, here is a thought. So many people say, well, you can't vote third party because that's a wasted vote, right? Obviously, for example, Gary Johnson or Jill Stein won't win. So it's obviously going to be Trump or Clinton winning. So you've got to vote for one to keep the other out because the country's going to go to hell in a handbasket if you let the wrong one get in. That's the argument that you hear time and time again as part of the apologetics for one of these pretty horrendous candidates. Not only is it a bad argument, it is entirely self-defeating. It contradicts itself. It actually argues for its opposite, and here's why. For most Americans, they live in a state where it is not a swing state, right? That whatever they vote as individuals, they know that it's going to go red or blue. It's going to go Trump or Clinton. Most Americans live in such a state. So actually, if you live in a state and you vote for Trump or Clinton, or indeed anyone, right, you're not going to change the outcome of the election at all because your state's electoral college votes are going to go to whoever, has the overwhelming majority in that state. So you do nothing. You make no difference whatsoever. If you live in a state that is not a swing state, the only way you can make a difference is to vote not for one of the main candidates or the other, because that's not going to change the outcome of the presidential election. But knowing that you can't change the outcome of the presidential election is to vote against the system itself, is to put some pressure on the system so that it is not just this duopolistic Muppet show next time round. Now, if a significant part of the vote in California, to pick a blue state, or Alabama, to pick a red state, were to be third party, then you actually have a political effect, right? Because the political establishment then gets to see the rise of another force in politics, that they cannot take for granted everything they've been taken for granted, okay? We have to put them on notice, in other words. Now, if you are in a non-swing state, that's the only difference your vote can make. That's the only way, in other words, not to waste a vote. So not only do I refute the argument that a vote for anyone other than Trump or Clinton is a wasted vote, I'm going to turn that completely on its head and say in most of the country, for most people who do not live in swing states, the only way to send any political message at all that anybody's going to take any notice of is to vote against the duopolistic status quo, is to vote against both Republican and Democrat, is to say to the political establishment, and you know what, to all other Americans, right? We need to have another way of doing this. We need to have another voice. We need to have a third party, something other than what we've got, at the very least. And frankly, obviously, my preferred third party candidate is Gary Johnson. But for these purposes, I don't care if you vote Jill Stein or whoever, right? We get a chance here to vote against the corrupt, established duopoly. Not only do we have a chance here to do that, but there's even more of a reason now than ever. Precisely because there are so few people who actually love Clinton, really positively want Clinton, and or actually love Trump, rather than just voting against the other one who they think is more dangerous. That means that if there's any time we can send this message to the political establishment that the duopoly isn't good enough anymore, it's this cycle. This is when we've got the chance of doing it. This is when we've at least got a chance of getting, let's say, Gary Johnson to 5%. So we get a third party with main party status in some states. so that we can actually give we the people, who are the biggest political bloc, right? The biggest political bloc are the disaffected independents now. They're not signed up Republicans. They're not signed up Democrats. They're the everybody else. Everybody else needs a platform. We can only do that by letting our votes tell the establishment that there's enough votes against both of them that those non-aligned, non-Democrat, non-Republicans are big enough as a group to be able to cause each one, the Republicans or the Democrats, to lose. Right? Now think about that. Think about that. If we can make, I've said this before on this show, if the guy in the middle, if the establishment knows that the guy in the middle isn't Republican and isn't Democrat, then both the Republicans and the Democrats have to work hard to please that guy who sits in the swinging middle. If the guy who's in the swinging middle has indicated that he's going to vote on, the founding principles of our country, on liberty, on not an intrusive state, or just on no more of this corrupt state financial corporatism axis, we can actually do that now. And if you're in a non-swing state, you can do that knowing that you do not increase the chance of the Republican or Democratic candidate, whichever one you think is most dangerous, getting in. So think about it. You have cover, right? You have cover if you're in a non-swing state. And that is most Americans. You can, if your conscience is telling you that there's something profoundly wrong with the way American politics is right now, and you would be right. But let's say you're more scared of Trump than Clinton. Go vote Johnson or Stein, because you cannot, because of the electoral college system, if you're in a non-swing state, increase or reduce the chance that Trump or Clinton will become the president. But what you can do with that vote is increase the chance that whoever gets in, and I think it's going to be Clinton for the record, will have to start paying attention to we the people. Just a little bit, just a little bit. I said a little bit, but actually maybe a large bit. Because if there are enough votes for third party that we have third party representation on a debate stage, absolute game changer. I put out an excerpt from a interview I did a while ago, and I put it out on YouTube, and I think it was just called Trump and Clinton are Muppets, or Clinton and Trump are Muppets. And I was just saying that, if you listen to these debates, really, it's just like listening to Muppets, with hands up their bottom. Like, there's just really nothing much coming out of there, and we shouldn't be taking it seriously. There's nothing original, there's nothing insightful, there's nothing philosophically competent about what we're hearing on those debate stages. It's kind of sad. But the only reason we take it seriously is because there is nothing else. There's no sensible, common sense, people-centered, non-tribal engagement with the issues that face America on that stage. So we take all that there is, Trump and Clinton, seriously. Put a Gary Johnson or even a Bernie Sanders on that debate stage with those other two, you completely change the debate. You change American politics to get them on the stage, right? Now, obviously, Sanders isn't in, right? The only option now for next time is to vote third party now. So, for my part, I'm in a solidly blue state. I am completely scared of Clinton, and I am completely scared of Trump. As I say, one is an egomaniac authoritarian by instinct. The other is I think, kind of more sane. I would say there's a sense in which Clinton is more sane and intelligent than Trump. But kind of authoritarian in another way. Not so much like authoritarian overtly by personality, but just with that kind of self-righteousness of knowing what's best for everybody, right? I'm not going to change the outcome of that by voting for the thing I actually believe in, voting my conscience, and voting Gary Johnson. I think that's what I'm going to do. Now, look, I'm thinking that there's some of you out there who are so kind of like me, object to where we are politically and object to having to choose between Trump and Clinton. You're going to sit on the sidelines. Oh, don't just vote. Go on. There is nothing to lose. And I tell you, and this is a whole, I could do shows on this looking to history. Sending the message through a 5% vote for something that's not Trump and not Clinton, that would be a story. That would be a story. We need to make a story an anti-establishment story. A story about how enough people did something surprising because they were so disgusted. If you stay home, then, the turnout is just going to be a few percentage points less than it would have been otherwise. That's not so much of a story. If the third party gets overwhelmingly more than it has ever got in modern times in America, that's a story. And that tells the Democrats and the Republicans that there's another group who aren't engaging in this tribalistic Republican head fake, who have to begin to be taken seriously because they can start to move elections. I think, for my conscience, both Trump and Clinton move us away from the good for different reasons. So even if I were not in a swing state, I would not, in a clear conscience, even if I was in a swing state, I would not, with a clear conscience, be able to vote for either one of them. And so I would probably still vote for Gary Johnson. I know that I would be better off under a Trump presidency if he could do what he said he would do than a Clinton one, just financially and et cetera, et cetera. But I don't believe he's competent. And like Clinton, he changes what he says according to his audience, et cetera, et cetera. I guess there's different kinds of corruption. One's a genuine political corruption and one's kind of is it an intellectual corruption or just an intellectual incompetence? I don't know. But I'm going to cast my vote along the lines of my conscience, and it will be the first vote I cast as an American, and it will be a vote in the direction of the good.
Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.